She's been involved in setting up internal comms functions from scratch, uplifting measurement strategies, optimizing channels to ensure they become reliable and consistent as part of the employee experience. Rachel is well versed in working with CEOs and executive leadership teams to expand their voice and influence in helping employees make sense and connect with what goes on inside and outside of organizations. She's a keen storyteller, straight talker, and believes that driving proactive and sustainable approaches to winning is the key to winning the hearts and minds of employees. Rachel, please, the stage is yours. Rachel, I think you're on mute and possibly need to click on the video button as well.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Apologies for this, just trying to work out my video. Here we go. Hi, how are you?
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. And thanks for that lovely introduction, Christy. I will correct you though, my name's actually pronounced Rachelle, but I get called Rachel.
Oh my goodness, I must have a streak going on with names today. Please forgive me.
Oh, really? No, that's fine. Okay, so thanks everybody for having me and I hope you're enjoying the conference. As I said, my name's Rachelle Bryant and I'm here to talk about measurement. So it's also known as the biggest bugbear of internal communications teams as well, as you probably know. So I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I am really passionate about practicing it. And, you know, at Aware Super at the moment, we're actually going through our own planning when it comes to measurement. So this presentation is really a collection of examples, concepts, and knowledge that will help you no matter where you are in your measurement journey. The point is to get started, which we'll go through. Two things to know up front is the perfect formula for demonstrating return on investment is still a pipe dream in internal communications in terms of a dollar value. However, what we can do is go a long way to demonstrate what we're doing and the strategy that we're pursuing is having an impact on the organisational strategy. And there are also many ways to measure, and how you measure is going to depend completely on what's important in your organisation. So as we talk through the examples, definitely try and pick and choose of what will work for you. So what we'll cover today is we'll go through defining your desired outcome from measurement. So what is it that you want to achieve? Knowing what to measure, knowing how you can measure. Oh, sorry. Sneak preview. I'm just trying to get rid of the Zoom screen. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Yep. So knowing what to measure, how we can measure, and how to tell the story of our data once we actually have the data there. And after we start measuring, how do we keep the momentum? So I wanted to just pause quickly and do a bit of an activity. So I'd love if you could write it down, just write down one thing you think you'll need to measure this year. So it could be an upcoming major change or restructure, but perhaps the broader effectiveness of your internal comms strategy, so your channels and that type of thing. And improvements to a particular channel, as I just said, sorry. And also, yeah, things like your employees' connection to organisational strategy. So I'll just give you a moment to think about that. Okay, so these numbers are hot off the press from the Gallagher 2021 State of the Sector Report for Internal Comms. I'm not sure if any of you have seen it yet, but I do suggest that you Google it after this conference. It's basically, they survey over 800 internal communications professionals across the globe on all things internal comms, so it's really valuable information. Here, it's got the top 4 internal comms priorities for teams. And as you can see, improving impact to measurement and evaluation is in there, which is really good. So, you know, it's, again, we know we should do it, but it's always easier said than done, right? Here's the current state, just a few numbers here. We've got 50% of teams measure reach. So reach, we will talk about reach, but it's really how many people are you reaching? So how many people are on your distribution list when you send an all-staff email, for example? 50% of people measure that. We've got here as well the overall satisfaction, behaviour change and business outcomes is only at 40%. And as we'll talk as well in this presentation, that's probably the most important thing to measure. As you can see, benchmarking is pretty low at 5%. Not really sure why that is. I might be speculating, but I think a lot of internal communications team, we are quite internal and quite insular, but it does pay to look outside of our four walls sometimes. And here I find this really interesting. 85% of internal comms professionals say that we do have a key role in capturing and amplifying employee feedback, but it doesn't quite match up with what we do with the other numbers here. So basically it's, again, easier said than done. We know we should do it, but it's easier said than done. And here quickly, here are some barriers to measurement that the survey picked up. So I see this as perceived barriers. I mean, there's no question that time, money, technology, and all the benchmarking data in the world obviously makes measurement easier, but now I've been in large and small teams. I've been in teams where we've had all of the metrics and reporting available. And then I've been in teams where we've had not much of that, but we're really good at listening to employees, and measurement still seems like a mystical kind of beast in a situation. So I think the point is to really do what we can, and something is almost better than nothing. So you don't necessarily need to wait for all the tools to be able to measure. It's not impossible. So we basically just need to get started. So how do we do that? So great internal communications plans always start with an objective. Measurement is no different. So start any measurement planning with the desired outcome. And that outcome will provide you focus and perspective when you actually do go to measure and when you're looking at a bunch of data, for example. What you measure is going to be different depending on where you work and depending on what's important to your organizational strategy. And it does, once you have the desired outcome in mind, then you'll know more broadly what it is you need to measure. I always think when I started running, for example, my goal or my desired outcome was literally just to be able to do it for a certain amount of time without stopping to walk every 5 seconds. So what I measured was my ability to be able to run without stopping to walk. A few years later, I started working towards a half marathon. So that was then my new desired outcome. So I then, as a consequence, measured different metrics, such as my pace and all that type of thing. But we can talk about running later. So as I said, defining your desired outcome provides focus and perspective. And these are a couple of questions that help you to find it. So what changes in behavior or attitudes is it that you want to see? And where are the opportunities to shift the dial in a way that's aligned with the business strategy? They're just really useful questions to have. We've also got some sources here that will help in defining your desired outcome. So looking at your organizational strategy and goals is number one. So what is it that the organization wants to achieve? If innovation is a huge strategic pillar, then innovation is going to be something that you might want to have an impact on. So that will be part of your measurement outcome. What do your leadership team expect? What's their vision for the future when it comes to the organization? Your internal comms strategy as well, if you've got one, or even if you're evolving it at the moment, that's a really good space to look. Results from your engagement survey or previous internal comms campaigns. So your engagement survey, I think many of us would use the engagement survey as kind of a vision of how people are feeling. So it's definitely good to look at those and think, okay, well, if people like at West Super, for example, we found that a lot of our staff connect to our strategy. They understand what it is that we're doing and they understand our purpose. But the understanding of how we're going to get there and the steps to get there was a bit lower. So we've now got that on our agenda as a desired outcome. Asking your stakeholders. So, I think when it comes to working on projects or campaigns, we can get into doing mode quite a lot, and it does help to just take a step back and ask your stakeholders, what is it that you actually want to achieve out of this? Because that will obviously help drive the communications, but it'll also help you be able to measure in a way that is purposeful. And lastly, brainstorming in your team and just thinking about what it is you want to achieve, and then who else from other teams needs to be in that conversation. Okay. So once you have the desired outcome, you can then identify what it is you need to measure. So let's take a look at the what's. These are the things, the what's are the things that, the options, if you like, that internal communicators have to measure. So we've firstly got inputs. Inputs is what it takes to run the function. And that could be, something if you're looking to evolve how internal communication serves the business, for example, that might be a really useful place to look. Got outputs. So outputs are the activities we do. Did we do the things we plan to do? What participation do we have? So how many people do we actually get dialing into our virtual all-staff meetings or attending our town halls? How many people are we reaching with internet articles and Yammer, etc.? And then it's also what are we saying? So our content. Another thing to measure is satisfaction. So we're not just here to communicate changes to people. We also do need to reflect the needs of our colleagues. And I loved when Kathy mentioned useful communications in the presentation just now, because it made me smile, because as you can see there, I've got, is it useful for people? Is it actually something people want? And is it available easily? Is the volume too high or too little? Is it credible? Do people actually look at our internal communications, emails or newsletters and think it's credible? And what opportunities are there for two-way feedback? We've got outtakes. So it's one thing to send the message, but outtakes really measure whether or not people received it and how they received it. So did people hear and understand what we communicated? Is there awareness? So awareness is a big thing, a big objective of many project teams, for example. So how are we going to measure that? Or sorry, that's something we can measure. We're going to how it later. Is it meaningful? And what's the understanding and what's the misunderstanding? And also, how much are people actually retaining the information that we send out? And then we can measure outcomes. So outcomes are the effects that our communications has on people, the effect or difference our communication output has on an audience. It's what we want employees to know, feel, do. And engagement surveys do focus on these outcomes quite a bit. And yeah, those are where we really can start to nail down our effectiveness. And lastly, another thing we can measure is, of course, business impact. So business impact is the results caused in part or full by our internal communications. So as we've got there, behavioural changes, retention, growth, innovation, productivity, engagement. These are the things that where the rubber kind of hits the road. And this is where we start to be able to demonstrate a return on investment, because what we've pursued is actually having an impact on these important things. So as you can see, from inputs to business impact, we're going from one end of the page to the other. So I like to think of this as a scale. So basically, as you move towards them, the value to collect these data becomes greater when it comes in terms of being able to measure your return on investment. So I'll stress now that you don't need to obviously measure all of these things. This is basically the smorgasbord of options when it comes to measuring. I think it's great to start at outputs and satisfaction, because that's really going to lay the foundation for you when you do go to look at outcomes and business impact. You do need to know how many people you're reaching before you attempt to actually send a message on something that's important to the organisation. A simpler way to think of what to measure is simply to map out what you want employees to know, feel and do. And this can work with your internal communication strategy as a whole, or with individual campaigns as well. This is a method I use daily, and it's just really, really helps to put it into simple form. Okay, so we've talked about what we can measure. Now we're going to talk about how. And some of the methods here will overlap, and the list isn't exhaustive by any means. And because methods will work together, and you can, as you can see, you can measure different whats with different hows, if that makes sense. So how do we measure inputs? We can use audits and analysis, time spent doing tasks, monthly reports of outputs and activity. Many of us have probably had to do that at some point, write down the things that we're working on that week, for example. Measuring outputs is where we start to count things. So how many emails did we send? How many town halls are we running? And it's also a content analysis exercise. So how many stories do we post on a certain topic? If growth is a huge thing on the agenda or part of your strategic pillar, then how many stories or how much content are we actually talking about our growth goals and what our employees' role is in growth? That's really important to know. Satisfaction. So we can use surveys, anecdotal feedback, so talking to people in the kitchen and that type of thing. Focus groups. Focus groups are really effective in being able to get many insights from employees. One-to-one interviews is another one. So the Gallagher survey that I mentioned before, that only had 24% of teams using those, and I actually think that one-to-one interviews are pretty effective because you do get more honest feedback, even more honest than you would in a focus group because they're alone, for example. Quick pulse checks as well, and self-administered diaries, which personally I've never used, but when I was researching for this presentation, I found it and I thought it was really interesting. You give somebody or a number of people a physical book. It all looks the same. It's all anonymous. And you ask them to respond in real time and literally write things down as they respond for a period of a couple of weeks, and you get that back. So really interesting. Measuring outtakes is where you can measure your views, how many people saw it, how many people clicked through, how many people liked it, how many people shared it. Comments on platforms like Yammer or Workplace by Facebook or something like that, where what is it that people are discussing. Also in the moment feedback, so live polls and questions at the bottom of articles. When I worked for Bupa a couple of years ago, we had a function where we could put at the bottom of the internet articles, for example, did you find this useful? And surveys. Surveys are good for a number of things. As you'll see, I've got outcomes, and then, yep, number one is surveys. So surveys are effective, they're useful, they're very common. You can measure certain different things at once. I do know that there's a bit of a caution, of course, to not over survey people. I think you've got to just be sure that you're actually going to act on the feedback, because I think it's not so much survey fatigue, it's more, I think people just get frustrated if they keep giving feedback and nothing changes. I think by human nature, we do love giving feedback in all aspects of life, but it's more if nothing changes, that's when it gets frustrating. And we don't have to survey the whole organisation every time. You can survey different sample groups as well. So there are ways you can do surveys quite effectively. And then I've got there as well, one-to-one interviews, focus groups, the diaries again, and observation of behaviour. And, you know, can you get exit survey data, obviously anonymous, from your HR team, for example, and the comments and the qualitative feedback in your surveys and other ways that you ask for feedback. And lastly, how to measure business impact. Again, I've got the surveys and focus groups there, always good, but you know, the questions you ask, obviously they're going to need to be a bit more, did that phishing campaign actually make you think when you got a phishing email to not click on it, for example. And I've also got listed there attrition and retention rates, the number of innovative programs. For example, if innovation is a huge strategic pillar, these are the things that you've got to really look to how you're having an impact there. Okay, and it's also important to remember here that you can also lean on metrics from other parts of the business, particularly when you're looking for business impact. And here, just for good measure, I've got an example of the no feel do that I mentioned before of how you'd lay that out. So here I've got, what you want people to know, feel and do. People feel like, and I've got this is an example of information security. So employees feel like the organisation takes cybersecurity seriously. They know what to do when met with a malicious email, text or phone call, and they actually do report phishing emails through the right mechanisms. Here's how you would measure that. So these are the hows we went through before. And just for good measure, the outputs in this example, for example, would include this list of things. So a test phishing email, an internet article talking about phishing and how drastic it can be for organisations. So we went through a lot just then, but my number one advice is start where you can. Just get started. Something is better than nothing, pretty much. So the way you get started, though, that's going to look different depending on what's important to your organisation. So that thing that you need to measure that you wrote down at the start, I hope that that's given you some things to write down to get started with. There's also just really, really important to start small. So I think when we think of measurement, sometimes we think that it's this big, like almost like another project we've got to tackle. And then obviously, because we've got so many projects, it just never quite gets up there. But it's really, you really just need to do it as you go and start small and not expect to boil the ocean all at once. So start with one channel. If you're looking to really shake up your all staff meetings or your town halls this year, start there. Your audience, if your organization's got leadership capabilities on the agenda as really essential to helping them move forward, then start with leaders and what they need. One event, again, just an event that you're working on, and one project. So a really big, if you've got something that's quite important this year, then that's when you can really hone in and think differently in how we're going to measure. So just wanted to pause to talk about return on investment as a concept, because you might be wondering where it fits into all of this. So as I said at the beginning, there's no perfect formula to measuring return on investment, unfortunately, but we do know that effective and consistent, transparent communications leads to higher productivity, trust, and engagement. So really what we need to know to be able to demonstrate is that the IC strategy we're pursuing and the activities we're doing are contributing to the organisation achieving its strategy and goals, rather than, a dollar figure or particular concept. So when we went through the what's and hows, you might have noticed that the things listed under business impact are things that internal communications doesn't entirely own, but we do contribute to it and partner with the business to achieve. So internal comms doesn't exist in isolation. It's there to support the business, and therefore the way we measure cannot exist in isolation. And driving changes in behaviour and engagement in productivity is, as you know, not just about communication. There's so many other factors, like your executives, for example. So thinking back to Kathy's really great presentation about how executives will be able to set the direction. That's huge in being able to drive these changes. But communication is a big part of it, but not all of it. And our senior leaders, I think our leaders know, the leaders I've worked with at least, they know communication with employees is essential, and they might have differing takes on what good communication looks like, but asking precisely what the dollar figure is, I've never come across that, and I think it's more they just need to know that the IC strategy that we're pursuing is having an impact on the greater good of the organisation and the goals and strategy of the organisation. So there's no perfect formula, but what we can do is really go a long way to test if our communication had the intended effect. So that's when we go back to the desired outcome that we spoke about before. And if that intended effect is aligned with the goals and strategy of the organisation, then we're well on our way to being able to demonstrate a return on investment. And I've got some examples there. So we do have an opportunity to partner with our colleagues in the functions that are already measuring these key metrics that are linked to our strategic priorities. So IT, HR, risk, finance, and then look at the link between how those metrics change and your communications efforts. So if we go back to that information security example I briefly went through, if you've got a huge campaign on phishing and why keeping customers' data safe is essential to us to keep running as a business, and then a test phishing email reveals that there are less people clicking on the malicious link, then you can probably find a connection that your efforts had an impact there. So now that we've got the hows and whats, now it's all about telling the story, the so what. So what does all of this actually mean, and how do we present it back and then make further recommendations? So I've got some tips here, things to ask yourself, which are really useful. So, what are the results telling me in relation to my desired outcomes? And then why do you think that might be the case? Any biases that you might have? Could there be alternative interpretations? Ask around with your colleagues and think, try and validate your thinking or question your thinking there. Think, what's the bigger picture? And then also, now what? So I'll give you an example here. When last year we did at Aware Super, we did a range of surveys and focus groups and one-on-one interviews with our colleagues to find out how effective our communications were. And we knew that videos was one thing we wanted to question, because our video views were really low last year, and we wanted to know why that was. So we assumed, maybe the content needs a bit of an uplift, or we need to take a different approach, which in part was correct, but also we didn't consider that 2020 was the year of looking at screens, and our people actually just said, I look at my screen all day, I'm in meetings all day, the thought of watching a 4-minute video again just doesn't quite interest me. So that was the bigger picture that you kind of need to put into context. And then when we reported that back, we could then say, we could have recommendations to move forward and maybe be a bit more conscious with video while we're still working so virtually. And here are just some tips to telling the story. This is really our bread and butter as internal communications professionals. We know how to distill complex information in a way that makes sense for the audience we're speaking to. Reporting on your measurement is really no different. So as I said, consider the context and bigger picture, give your perspective on what the data tells us, using verbatim from your people. So if you've got comments from surveys or focus groups, put them into your pack or, the way you're presenting it back. Don't overthink it, which of course is easier said than done, but definitely good to keep in mind. And reporting on those outcomes and linked to the business impact is really important. So that's when your desired outcomes are going to really come in to help you there. And obviously tailoring your content depending on your audience, which we're all very good at doing. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about keeping the momentum. So how to continue to track that progress. So you've done it once and you did really great and really proud of yourself. So how are you going to keep going? Once you get started, how you move forward, it's all about just getting together as a team and just consciously talking about it, because your goals and strategy as an organization are going to change. So then you'll need to figure out a way to be able to track progress really regularly. So let's look at some ways to do this. So simply deciding how often you'll measure and how, and then actually make it a part of your content or communications calendar. If you've got one, if you don't have one, you could put it into your Outlook, for example, just a conscious 1 hour a month, if that, just to make it part of your regular activities. Setting up a metrics or survey questions that you can use over time is really useful. We've started doing that at Aware this year. So we've got a set of questions that we're going to ask a small sample of people after each all-staff meeting, and then try and track how we move throughout the year. And creating measurement plans, and that can be as simple as putting through, Q1, 2, 3, 4, what is it that you're going to measure and how, and just putting that somewhere and working it into your usual rhythm. I think it's worth considering here when we're talking about regular rhythms and regular measurement on a smaller scale. It's how we get feedback and give feedback in our regular lives. So I shop at ASOS. Every time I receive my order, I receive an email asking me to rate my experience. I don't receive an email every year asking me to rate all my experiences throughout the year with ASOS. It's in the moment, it's small, it's a 2-minute survey, but it's regular. QR codes are another really important way to get feedback these days. I've seen them everywhere. And again, when I worked for Bupa, we had people who didn't have work laptops or work phones, so we actually printed out QR codes in the kitchens, and then that was a way they could give feedback in an ad hoc manner. So it's really about, the regular measurement and smaller scale will mean that your internal communication strategy doesn't really feel like a mountain to climb, and the way you're receiving feedback is in those smaller chunks, so you can make changes along the way. And I think that will just make it seem a little less scary. And this is a trend as well. So in the Gallagher survey, that just came out last week said 68% of internal comms teams are now using pulse surveys to collect employee views and feedback. So it's definitely, we're definitely moving in that direction. Okay, so to wrap up, just a few things to remember. So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but your desired outcome will guide what you focus on in measurement. That will just don't just, even though you know you should start measuring, don't just do it because you know you should, do it with a defined purpose. Start where you can, no matter how small it is. Don't, it's okay to just get started. Measurement's a journey, so that kind of ties in with the second point. It's you just need to, what you measure will change as you go, but the point is to get started. And then as an internal comms function, know what you can control and what you can learn from other functions, what you can lean, on other functions for. And the last part, it's quite long, but I just think it's a good thing to keep in mind, clarity on the impact you're having puts you in a better position to add value because you know the impact you're having, and you're able to make data-driven decisions when you're going to work out comms approaches for the many campaigns and projects that are going to come your way. And you can also advise on something with data, something more than your opinion. Even though our opinions are insightful and we're full of expertise, it does help, organizations run on data. So it really helps that internal communications can run on data too and ground their efforts in data. No, that's it. I did just want to talk to you some of the resources I found here that I just wanted to share. So the Gallagher State of the Sector is awesome. It's got everything and more when it comes to internal communications. And it's just really good for insights of what's coming down the line. And it does help to benchmark as well. So, only 5% of people, of teams benchmark that we saw at the start. I think if they read the State of the Sector report, it will help.
Rachelle, we've also shared the Gallagher link on the discussions section of this presentation, so people will be able to access it. We do have a question, and if we can transition out of the PowerPoint sharing mode, they'll be able to see you in a larger box, because right now you're a thumbnail. But okay, so the first question we have right now is from Jen Zimmerman, who has asked if you have any recommendations for particular tools or apps that measure some of those metrics that you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. So Populo is a good one to start with. Populo measures email communications, but it also helps to put templates in. Populo as well are just a really good resource hub. If you just type in populo.com and go to resources, they've got heaps of internal communications best practice information. And I think it depends on what intranet you've got, but intranet analytics, they're really good as well. Banana Tag's another one that hooks into your Outlook if your distribution lists are quite complicated. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And I do know that Banana Tag has also released almost a type of Google Analytics filter for those of you who are using an intranet that uses Google Analytics. They've got this which simplifies it and converts some of those stats so that it's suitable for internal comms. I'll try and share this on the discussion once I find it. I think they also just integrated with Workday as well, which your company uses Workday. Yeah, saw that. Okay. And I do know that there are actually quite a lot of with the crossover that's happening with comms and marketing, we have come across quite a number of tools where people are adapting marketing and traditional social media type measurement tools now within employee networks.
Yeah, and that's a good point actually, Christy, because you can, a company I've worked for before, I just asked the marketing team what they use to send emails, and it turned out we could use it internally as well. So it actually gave us some reporting for our CEO emails.
Yes, exactly.
So link in with your marketing team and see if there's something there.
Because you just might be able to share that license and not even have to request for additional
less
budget.
Of a cost, yeah.
Yeah. I'll share a link. There's a number of tools, actually marketing tools that can be adapted to IC. I'll pop it in the discussion. But does anyone have any other questions before we head into the next presentation? We've got 3 minutes left. This is your last 3 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, going once and going twice. But yeah, I thought that was a great presentation, Rachelle, and I really appreciated how you broke it down as well and brought the different parts to it, because sometimes we all want to focus on outcomes, but sometimes it's important to see how even the outtakes and the outputs really lead into that. We've got one now from Marnie, actually. She mentioned that she's using MailChimp for our monthly CEO email to our 3 stakeholders, members, staff, and volunteers. Is there a better platform to use where measurement is more intuitive? I like the sound of the tick box you mentioned. Did you find this information useful?
Yeah. So that was actually through Populo from memory. So MailChimp's, I believe, I haven't used it personally, but I believe it's more of an external marketing tool. And whereas you can get more internal communications purpose-built products. So Populo and Banana Tag are those. So there's definitely, they have actually a pulse survey feature, particularly Banana Tag. They have, it's like an extra cost, but it does pulse surveys out all the time. Otherwise,
you could
Microsoft
work around
Forms,
it too. Because, for example, in MailChimp, Marnie, you can add buttons. So you could just always put your own line at the bottom. Did you find this useful? Yes or no? And click those links and they head maybe to a blog post. And then you just track how many people click the link in MailChimp, and that will give you an idea.
That's true. You can just set up an intranet page or something and just say, thanks for giving your feedback.
Thank you.
And then you've got the click, the number of clicks means the number of people that clicked on useful. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Any other questions? No, nothing. Is there anything that comes to mind, Rachelle, that maybe people have asked you before that you think might be worth covering? The problem with MailChimp, according to Michael D. Mauro, is the unsubscribe.
Yeah, because if you use it internally, then people can unsubscribe. Yeah, that's not good. Yeah.
Okay, Edwina.
You can't do that with internal comms ones.
Yes, exactly. Just keep updating that subscription list. But Edwina did ask, for anyone starting on their measurement journey, what's the one starting point you would recommend?
I mean, like I said, once you've got the defined outcome and you know what you want to achieve, a good place to start is just start with one. Start with one audience, one channel. I think it'll not only make you get used to it as a team, but it'll just at least help to then think, okay, this is what we're actually getting in feedback, and to be able to then put it back.
Yeah, exactly. It does. We are almost going to get disconnected for this particular session. There was one more question, Rachelle, so maybe you'd like to pop into the platform and just answer it regarding town halls. But thank you so much for sharing this with us, and do connect with Rachelle via LinkedIn. I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love more connections, so definitely.
No worries. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next session, everyone. We're going to be heading right to it right now. All right, bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks for that, Christy. Thanks, Rachelle. Sorry to be so abrupt with that. The platform is just at the moment set up to cut off the session.
Yep.
So we didn't want anyone to be cut off halfway through speaking.
No worries. Oh, I see. We've got the afternoon break now. Okay, so they've got like a half an hour. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
So then we'll come back for the final sessions.
Yeah, I think we're going to try and set up something, see if there's a way we can stop it cutting off tomorrow, just so we don't have that sort of thing. But with people tending to speak a little bit longer, some people go 10 minutes longer. So we need to try and find a balance for that.
No, it definitely does help. The trouble right now is that the speakers are not on the platform, so they don't see the countdown happening. And when they're in full screen mode, sharing a presentation in Zoom, I'm not sure they're seeing the chat either.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Yeah, so my recommendation is maybe find a way to work around that.
Yeah, I guess we did the same thing as well as what Emily did with you guys. Just some of them weren't, I guess, fully comfortable working just in the events thing and having Zoom. So something, I guess, to work out moving forward. But that discussion then really ramped up right at the end when we were running out of time.
I know people. We had a full half an hour. Ask your questions early. Oh gosh, people are just jokers. They're just jokers.
Yeah.
But well, hopefully she'll be able to answer that last town hall question. I don't think there was anything else that we missed though. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I think we're just going to go for a little bit of a break, and then Emily will take back over in the afternoon sessions.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks for, I guess, running that. You're doing a really amazing job on it.
No worries, Corey. No worries. Yeah, I am looking forward to it. Endings are terrible to say because I'm 3 hours behind the Aussie time, and so when I realized, oh no, I'll have to be up at 5:30 in the morning, I was like, oh, I should have reconsidered this.
Yeah, we do appreciate it, but it's only a couple more sessions, and then you're officially done for the day.
Thank God Sora's dealing with day 2. I'm so glad it's split up between both of us, so that helps. But yeah, I'll catch you after the afternoon break.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
Thanks.